Hello again, still Algebra 2, Unit 4, Section 6.2, Polynomials and Linear Factors. This is video 3. I'm going to take a moment to now graph what one of these functions looks like. General rule of thumb, the higher the degree, the more change in directions you're going to see on your graph. Sometimes you'll have things flatten out and they won't look like they're changing direction, but for the most part you're going to see a lot of peaks and valleys inside of these graphs with several zeros, multiple relative maximums and minimums. And to start graphing, we're just going to graph old school. We're going to use what we know about zeros. We're going to create some points and then we'll collect some data between those points, specifically the zeros. So first, if we have to find the zeros, remember factors lead us to zeros. So this factor would give us a 0 of -1. The second factor would give us a 0 of 1. And the last factor would give us a 0 of -3. So hopefully you know by now that zeros of a function, they're called zeros because these are the inputs that will give us outputs of 0. Which means on a graph, this is where this curve is going to hit the x-axis. So I'm going to have a dot at 1, at -1, and at -3. So that's really where my graph's going to cross the x-axis. So now I need to know what's happening between these zeros. Is there a peak there? Is there a valley there? What's going on between them? And the simplest way to find out is to pick a value and plug it into your function. So first I want to find what's happening between these two zeros right here. I want to know, does this graph curve up? Does it curve down? And like I said, the easiest way to do that is to pick a value like 0. Notice how 0 is directly in between these two zeros right here. So I'm going to plug 0 in for every x. So this would be 0 plus 1 would be 1. 0 minus 1 would be -1. And 0 plus 3 would be 3. So now I'm going to multiply those values. 1 times -1 is -1. -1 times 3 is a -3. So when I input 0, I got out -3. So I can graph that point. So down 3. Which means now I have some of this graph. From this 0, I'd be traveling down to this relative minimum. And again, I'm saying relative minimum because I don't know if it's the lowest point on my graph, but currently right now it's between two zeros and it's a low point, therefore it's called a relative minimum. So if we continue on, I still want to see what's happening with more of this graph. So now I want to know what's happening between these two zeros right here, the 0 of -1 and -3. So the easiest way to find out, plug a number in. So I'm going to plug in -2 inside of this original function right here. So I'd have -2 plus 1. I'm plugging -2 in for all the x's. And -2 plus 3. And let's simplify each one of those binomials. So this would be -1. This would be -3. And -2 plus 3 is 1. So when I multiply all those values, I get -1 times -3 is 3. 3 times 1 is 3. So when I input -2, I just got out 3. So I'm going to graph that point. To the left 2 and up 3. So now I know from this 0 here, I'm going to be traveling upward, hitting that relative maximum, and then traveling back downward. And then lastly, we want to see what's happening to this graph to the far right and to the far left of the farthest right 0 and the farthest left 0. So again, the simplest way to do that is just to plug in a value. So I'm going to plug in, let's go 2. When I plug in 2, essentially I'm really looking for, is this output going to be positive or it's going to be negative? I really just want to know the end portion of the graph. Is it going to continue upward or going to continue downward? So when I plug in 2 to this first binomial, that would equal 3. Plug in 2 to the second, that would be 1. And plug in 2 to the third, and that would be 5. And notice how I'm multiplying all positive values together. Therefore, when I input 2, I'm going to get out a positive idea, which just means my graph's going to continue upward. And then let's also plug in a number smaller than -3. So let's plug in -4, just for the simple fact that I want to see what's happening to the graph after the last 0. So when I plug in -4 into the first linear factor, that would give me -3. I plug in -4 right here, that would give me -5. And plug in -4 right here, that would give me a -1. And notice I'm multiplying three negatives together, therefore my result is going to be negative, which means the end cadence on this graph would be traveling downward. So by using the factors, we can come up with the zeros of the function. We can graph those zeros first, and zeros are located right there on the x-axis, and by knowing those zeros, now it gives us a rough outline of where do I plug in numbers and where can I find relative maximum minimums and what is the end behavior of the curve.